The Hinagami estate stirred not even in the slightest. Its son and daughter were en route to Tokyo. Their mother was long gone while their father was away, buried with work. Their servant was deceased while their grandmother was being questioned. The only one left was the sickly grandfather.
失礼します。
I slid open the door and stepped inside.
家人の留守に入ってくるとは盗っとかね。
Sickly old man's voice greeted me. It was Hideyomi Hinagami. His voice was indomitable even as he rested in his futon. Yet despite his efforts to hide his weakness from an intruder, he couldn't conceal his frailty.
ひながみ綾人君と
Decided to be honest. After all, I probably would have been suspicious of me otherwise. Hideyomi nodded. Does he know what's going on, or is he too far gone to understand any of it? Probably the former by the looks of it.
何を尋ねたいのか。
As proof, his steely gaze remained trained on me. Well, he sure as hell is going to be a tough nut to crack, isn't he?
綾人君の周囲ではここ一月で多くの人が亡くなられています。
初耳だな。
Couldn't tell whether he was being sincere.
上園真由、糸瀬瑞希、高宮めぐり、そして桐村優香。
おお。
That sounded like a yes to
ご
me.
存知なのですね。
それらはひながみに嫁ぐものだ。
I knew it.
綾人君の配偶者ですね。
Hideyomi shifted his head at my question.
前の3人はな。ただし
どういう意味ですか。
言葉通りよ。床に資格はない。
Qualifications? What
桐
qualifications?
村さんが使用人だからですか。
そうだ。
Hideyomi nodded after a beat. To me, that seemed less like affirmation, more of a sure, let's go with that. Which was partially why it seemed too obvious an explanation. I honestly didn't get the impression that social class had anything to do with it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have hesitated. Then what other reason would have made Yuka Kirimura ineligible to marry Hinagami?
桐村さんの母親もこちらで働かれていたのですか。
The suspicion came to mind, so I continued my inquiries to confirm it.
ゆかがまだ幼い頃に死んでしまったが。
Hideyomi
桐
sighed.
村さんの父。
シナ事変で死んだ。衛生兵だったが爆発に巻き込まれたそうだ。
I had no means of verifying that claim. Thus, all I could do was shelve my suspicion as just a theory for the time being. Now I had more questions than ever, but I needed to press
で
on.
は高宮めぐりさんが綾人君の婚約者に決まったのはいつですか。
以前からしずるが決めていた。
So Shizuru Hinagami really is at the center of all this. That was good to know, but I wanted a more specific time frame. Had it been after Masaki was found, or after Mayo Kamizono and Mizuki Itase were
こ
murdered?
の候補者を知っているのはどなたですか。
わしとしずるのみだ。
ご家族であっても。
無論
Hideyomi shook his head. By this point, I was convinced the culprit had to be someone with knowledge of Masaki's bridal candidates. And that's the thing, Karen is Shizuru's secretary. She said as much. Karen would be able to fucking sneak in and find that information. I'm just saying. It was hard to imagine that 3 out of 4 victims being said candidates was a coincidence after all.
漏洩する可能性は。
可能性を論じてはキリがあるまい。しかしそう漏れることはないはず。
Sounded like he said that to cover for his family, but exactly why remained a
で
mystery.
は他に候補者は。
Now it reached the crux of the matter. If they'd picked another candidate after Megari Takamiya, there was a very good chance she'd be murdered next.
答えられん。今言った通り
では今候補に上がっている方本人も知らないのですね。
知らぬであろうな。打診はしてあるが相手が孫であるとは伝えておらぬ。
It's possible I'd have to resort to every means at my disposal to get him to cough up the name. Wait, maybe it's her. Couldn't say for sure, of course. For all I knew, I was totally off the mark, but still.
疲れた。
Hideyomi's eyelids drooped.
すみません。
Better get going. I bowed and got to my
またお
feet.
話を聞くこともあるかと思い。
いつくたばるかわからん命だ。
Hideyomi took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Bowed one last time and left the room. It was already pitch black out by the time I returned to the inn. So he's wondering, could it be... Oh! Right! Because Yu's grandmother had said she can't be, you know, tainted before her wedding day, and Reiji says, "Oh, is she, engaged to be married soon?" And he's like, "That's none of your business." So the current candidate is Yu, right? That would make her the current candidate. Now then, the other question is, I know at some point they mentioned the person that, what's his fuck? Shizuru had an affair with. Uh-huh. Yeah, we don't have that information here. I forget the name of the person he had an affair with. Oh wait, wasn't it that Keiko woman that died from the curse? No, that was just a random person. Okay. I feel like they definitely gave us the name of whoever died. Or whoever died. Rika Hinagami. Aito and Karen's mother. What was the name of the person he had an affair with? Because is that what Reiji's trying to imply? Yuka was brought in as her mother was employed there, and they say that her father died off in the war, but is it then possible that Shizura impregnated her, and that's why she couldn't be chosen, right? Is because technically that would make them blood siblings? Because I think that's what I started to pick up on what he was implying. Now that doesn't necessarily mean her mother was the person who worked at the worked at the Hinagamis, but or the one that Hinagami had an affair with. But I think that's what Reiji's trying to get to. Is we know that Shizuru is a horn dog, a ladies' man who slangs his dick in every which direction. So I feel like it's very possible that they make up some story about, Yuka's father dying off in the war that can't be verified, right? When in actuality, she is actually Shizuru's kid. His illegitimate love child. I feel like that's very likely. Man, I wish I had a better way of comparing her face with no, not this way. And where's Karen? Because honestly, if you look at Karen, right? Look at her face and then look at Yuka's. Karen's hair is a bit... No, they're both pretty dark brown. They have pretty similar, facial features. Hair color, eye color. I could see that being the case. Supposedly didn't fulfill the requirements to marry into the Hinagami family. And I think that's 100% because she was an actual sibling. And now I totally believe Yu is the next one in line after Meguri's death. And I feel like it could definitely be Karen doing this in a fit of revenge because she has this unrequited love for her brother. And why should they be able to bear his children when she's unable to do so, right? that's why I feel like that's another reason why she didn't like really jump on Ayato for, you know, not taking up his position as an heir, right? Like, why don't everyone else like, no, you need to inherit the Hinagami name. You need to be the successor. Whereas Karen didn't seem fazed about that at all. She asked, how long are you staying here? When are you going back to Tokyo? Because she's fine with him not staying there. She wants to be his little side piece. But she knows she can't be his little side piece if... Why is my brain blank right now? She can't be his little side piece if he inherits the Hinagami name, because not only would she then be a blood sibling, but for the same reason she can't be the heiress, she's infertile. She couldn't give kids to him. She couldn't produce more heirs, right? But if they're both away from the Hinagami family, then it doesn't matter, right? I feel like all roads kind of lead back to Karen at this point. I feel like the only one who could really convince Yuka to go somewhere else, right, would be Karen. I feel like, because for Yuka would have had a reason to go out there, right? I feel like if there's anyone who could convince her to go out there, it would be Karen. And I think that's another reason why Madoka's trying to cover up. And I think another big point was that Yuka was very much trying to convince Ayato to, you know, inherit the family, whereas Karen didn't really care, right? So maybe if she doesn't even see Yuka, right, as a potential, you know, threat to having her brother, right? She knows that trying to convince him to take that spot, you know, takes him away from her. So she gets rid of Yuka for that. For that? I'm not sure. Because that is the interesting point about Yuka's murder, right? Obviously, it was done to cast even more suspicion onto Ayato. 100%. I think that was the main goal of it all, was to cast more suspicion onto Ayato. And when you follow the trail that all three of the previous ones had been arranged marriages for Ayato, and then the fact that Yuka at one point was considered but didn't fulfill the requirements, it still kind of fits in line. But I feel like this one, it didn't follow a pattern, more so that, or maybe she had been chosen. Maybe that she had been chosen, they changed their... Maybe there was talks of her being chosen, and that's all Karen needed. They're like, oh, maybe Yuka, but then they realize, oh wait, no, that's actually Shizura's other child. It couldn't be Yuka. I still feel like, but that's the thing, another thing is that it felt like it was definitely Nanako who did the killing in that last one. Especially that specific line of a hatchet pulled from a destroyed house. Now, could that have been Karen? 100%. Karen, that could have just been a line to throw us off of Karen's trail, right? Karen could have gone and dug that hatchet up, but we know for a fact that Nanako visited that house. Meanwhile, Karen was pretty much attached to the hip, but if she is in cahoots with Nanako, like I've kind of been assuming this whole time, right? If Karen is in cahoots with Nanako, then of course she tells Nanako to take care of it, and she just cuddles up with Masaki all day, because then that way she has an alibi. Oh yeah, I was with my brother all day. I haven't seen him in years, so of course I wanted to be next to him the whole time. That's definitely something, for sure. Yeah, no, I think that's something. If they're working in cahoots and then Karen finds a way to convince Yuka to go to that offside shrine. Meanwhile, Nanako is waiting for her because she's in cahoots with Karen. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, for me, that's what it comes down to. Nanako and Karen are in cahoots, and I think they're both committing the murders. But I feel like they're switching off who does them. Actually, that would work out very well. Actually, that kind of lines up, because it was more than likely Karen who committed the first murder, because Nanako went to go approach Ayato after the incident with Mayu. Because after he got released the first time, it was after Mayu's death, and that's when Nanako first approached him. Then if the second one was Karen, and then the third one was for sure... No, the third one was for sure Karen. The second one was Nanako. If the first one was Karen, then the second one was Nanako. The third one would have had to have been Karen, because Nanako had her alibi. And then the fourth one is once again Karen. If they're following that pattern, I could see that. Or the fourth one was once again Nanako. Jesus, I keep getting mixed up. Karen, Nanako, Karen, and then Nanako, this most recent one. I feel like that's the case. Because this time with Yuka, when we saw the murderer's perspective, there was no remorse, right? If it would have been Karen to do it, you would have assumed, like with Megari, there would have been some sense of remorse because of how long Yuka's been in the family. So I feel like that is what's happening. I feel like they're trading off every other time. They're in cahoots. For some reason, I don't know why. Maybe it comes down to that codependency thing that Yuzuru was talking about before, right? She suffered a lot of childhood abuse. Yeah, was abused by her father, but let him have his way with her since she's codependent. Uh-huh. So, I feel like is she seducing Shizuru? That's the thing, we know she's codependent. We know that's just written right there in the facts. She's codependent. So she's going to be reliant on someone else. So she sees like another like father figure in her life, right? In the way of Shizuru, which was probably why she was very okay with all of So's moves on her at the clinic. But I'm thinking maybe Shizuru is taking advantage of Nanako. And then I guess they're in cahoots, right? Karen's like, I won't expose your relationship with my father as long as you help me get the information I need, as long as you take care of the things I need you to take care of, right? Maybe Karen has some sort of blackmail over Nanako, since we know that Karen works very closely with Shizuru. Obviously, Shizuru is another key player in all of this, of course, and we just haven't seen any of him yet. But given all that we've gotten thus far, I feel like that's a more likely option. Is that she's latched onto Shizuru, and Shizuru's happy to throw dick wherever he can. He doesn't give a fuck. Meanwhile, Karen has some blackmail over it and uses Nanako to get into Shizuru's files, right? Because what Hideyome tells us is that the only one who would have knowledge of who the candidates are Shizuru and Hideyome. That's it. Absolutely no one else would have any information. Where's Shizuru? Yeah, Shizuru chooses all the candidates, and Hideyome is the only one who knows all the candidates. So I feel like that's got to be the case. And that would make sense then why Nanako gets chosen to accompany Karen to Hitogata. Because if Nanako is, you know, very close with Shizuru, yeah. Because that's the thing. If Shizuru is lining up these candidates, right, it doesn't make sense that he'd be the one ordering them killed. It doesn't make sense. That just does not check out. It would not make sense for Shizuru ordering the hits when he's trying to line up these marriage candidates for his son. That wouldn't make sense. What would make sense is that if he has someone he's sleeping with who's backstabbing him, and then I feel like Karen would have to have some kind of blackmail, because then why else would Nanako backstab him? Because as someone who suffers from codependency, right, why would she try to harm the person she's relying on? Why would she try to, you know, damage in any way the person she's relying on? Probably because Karen has some kind of blackmail that could ruin what she has with Shizuru. And somehow they're both involved in these murders. See, you can tell Nanako's heavily involved just by the huge fucking paragraph of information we have on her. Everyone else just has some, like, sentences here and there. Yo, even Masaki doesn't have enough information on him as Nanako does. Which is pretty fucking wild. Right. Shizuru Hinagami asked her to mediate in arranging marriages. So she would have some information. Well, that's the thing. If Shizuru is asking her to arrange marriages, clearly she would know. She's not telling the women who, but she would know who the candidates are. But, okay, then that is what Hideyomi said, right? The next candidate is someone that only he and Shizuru know. Because Nanako said that after the death of Megari, Shizuru stopped telling Nanako who it is. But I don't think that doesn't mean there isn't a way for Nanako to find out. So Nanako was the one mediating the arranged marriages. We know this much. So clearly she would have known those first three. She would have just known that. So she could feed that information to Karen. I feel like Karen's a major player in this. It just hasn't really been exposed yet. But these two right here, they're in cahoots. I feel like they're both guilty. This one's the most guilty. I feel like they're both guilty. She's trying to keep her hands out of it because she just wants to fuck her brother. Meanwhile, she wants to keep fucking the dad. I feel like that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm assuming everything's lining up currently. It was already pitch black out by the time I returned to the inn. Moving around the settlement after sunset was a nightmare due to the lack of street lights and the dearth of house lights. And though the snow itself was bright, staying on the roads took a lot for an outsider such as myself. In other words, I would have probably frozen to death in some field had I been caught in that blizzard the night before. I left no doubt in my mind that Yuki Kitamoto's murder was a local. Then again, that wasn't saying much, since Inspector Inui and I were the only outsiders in the village. Speak of the devil. Inspector Inui suddenly emerged from the inn, even though I'd heard he was supposed to be spending the night at the police station.
Kimi ka?
何かあったのですか?
I went up to him and asked.
大まかな検視報告が上がってきた。まず死因だが。
ああ、待ってください。
ここで十分だ。
Can't you take the hint that a guy's freezing out here? Oh, forget it. So I had to whip out my notebook and start taking notes.
死亡前、何らかの薬品によって体の自由を奪われた恐れがある。
That made sense. There were no signs that she'd been strangled or knocked unconscious, so it would have been nearly impossible to stab her in the abdomen otherwise.
死亡推定時刻は夜10時過ぎから朝7時までの間だ。
That gap was a bit too large for my liking, but I imagined it would be all but impossible to get a precise time of death when dealing with a body that had been left outside in the dead of winter.
凶器は大ぶりのナタだった。
凶器が見つかったのですか。
付着した血液の鑑定を待たねばならんが、ほぼ間違いあるまい。
No shock there. The killer must have been wearing gloves on such a cold night.
今分かっていることはこの程度だな。
それを伝えに来ただけじゃありませんよね。
His face certainly had hinted he'd been looking for me.
凶器が発見された廃屋は、
Yep.
以前沢城家が使っていたそうだ。
それで沢城奈々子さんに話。
Nanako had stayed here in Hitogata, unlike Matsuki and Karen.
当然知らないと突っぱねられたがね。
Of course she had. You'd have to be crazy to remember all the junk you'd left in your old house.
それとなく見張ってくれ。
You knew he started off leaving only those words behind. Does he suspect Nanako Sawashiro? I mean, I guess she does fit all the criteria, but... I went inside and rubbed the snow off my shoes. And that's the thing, maybe Nanako isn't the one carrying out the murders, but is the one feeding Karen information. That is totally possible, because there is at least one murder that lines up to where Nanako couldn't be responsible. But it is fully possible that Nanako fed Karen information not only about Meguri being, the one who was the bridal candidate, but also say, like, oh, she's in her hotel, she's all alone, there's no one around, it'd be perfect, giving her the circumstances of where Meguri is and how best to approach the situation, right? I'm freezing. Good thing there's a bath with my name on it.
あら、時坂さん。
Nanako came by with a towel in
こ
hand.
んばんは。あなたは戻られなかったんですね。
明日帰るつもりです。
Wisps of gloom shrouded her face.
カレンさんの邪魔はしたくありませんでしたから。
邪魔？
あの子は昔からお兄ちゃん子でしたからね。隼人君と久しぶりに一緒にいられて。
Yeah, when you say really
ずっと
loves,
喜
you
んでいましたか
mean...
ら。
あは。
Yes, that would make the cop assigned to watch them the third wheel then. Poor guy.
これからお風呂ですか。
ええ、刑事さんも帰られましたから。
何をお話になったんですか。
Decided to play dumb.
ゆかさんを殺した凶器が前に私が住んでいたところから出てきたとか。
In contrast, she answered honestly.
私が疑われているので
Bitch,
しょう
I
ね。
suspect you.
彼らは疑うことが仕事ですからね。
それは理解しています。ですが、私がゆかさんを殺す動機なんてないでしょうに。
That we know of. Therein lay the problem. No one, police included, had any idea why the killer had gone after Yuka Kirimura. That one seems very obvious. Even though she doesn't have a connection the other three do, it was just to frame Ayato and cast even more suspicion on him. That, or what I could see happening is Karen assuming that Yuka would be next in line and not knowing the full details, especially after Shizuru stopped having Nanako mediate everything, after he said he's going to keep everything strictly between him and Hideyomi. So Karen just starts assuming, like, oh hey, here's this other woman that's been, a big part of Ayato, that was a huge part of Ayato's life growing up, very close to him, very close to the family. Perhaps she's next. She wasn't one of the bridal candidates, so I could only imagine she got mixed up in this whole mess by accident. Kind of what I'm assuming. Was it because she was close to the Hinagamis? Kind of what I just
で
said.
は失礼します。
Nanako bowed before heading off to the bathhouse. Guess I'll take my turn there after having a bite. I took a soak in the unoccupied bath after finishing dinner, then returned to my room and popped a smoke between my lips. Time to get my thoughts straight. Oh, let's go. The biggest question on my mind was how I was going to handle Yuka Kirimura's murder. It was likely linked to the homicides in Tokyo. However, the investigation proper would be best left to the local authorities. It definitely helped that Inu was providing me with updates on said investigation, for the time being anyway. Therefore, it was probably best if I looked at the big picture instead. That, and ensuring there were no more victims, of course. Should I return to Tokyo and question Shizuru Hinagami as soon as possible? Or should I do a little more digging into Lord Hina here in Hitogata first? Fuck! Don't make me pick here. Don't make me pick here. Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. The latter wouldn't be an easy task, though, that's for sure. Not when both the Hinagamis and the Shikazas had exhibited particularly tight lips. Maybe I should go meet with Hideyomi Hinagami again. Turned out to be quite the chatterbox. There's a chance he'll tell me more. No, forget it. It's too optimistic. Even today, he danced around the most important facts. The faith of Lord Hina had been passed down for generations, so I found it hard to believe he'd spill his secret so easily. Plus, I'd probably have to look into it myself in the end. Still, there was something I could say for sure. These women were not killed for worshipping a false Lord Hina, as per the legend. No, that story was just a front for the true reason behind the deaths. For our killer was in fact a psychopath kills her. Is our killer's motive to murder all of Ayato Hinagami's bridal candidates? If that was the case, then I need to figure out the why of it all. First thing that came to mind was the idea that the murderer didn't want Ayato succeeding the Hinagami family. However, that would cast Ayato or Masaki as the prime suspect. He made it clear he didn't want to take the reins of the family after all. Thus, I couldn't completely rule out the possibility that he was going around murdering his bridal candidates. On the other hand, there was another suspect for whom the same motive could apply: Karen Hinagami. It was plausible that she was trying to prevent Ayato's marriage so that both the family and Hinagami Pharmaceuticals would be hers. That was simply a theory, seeing as how I didn't know where Karen stood on all this. But of course, that wasn't to say those two were the only suspects. Take Shizuda Hinagami, for example. He did know all the bridal candidates after all. He also wasn't in the settlement at the moment, which meant that he could move freely under our noses. However, if that was the case, he probably needed an accomplice in Hitogata. As sparsely populated as the settlement was, he could never go unnoticed amidst all the snow. Well, I wouldn't have recognized Shizuda Hinagami even if I saw him, since we'd never met before. It's a different story for the rest of the villagers. Thus, the chances of him being the killer were next to none. The door slid open, revealing you.
どうかしましたか?
I sat up and faced you, casually dropping the cigarette I'd forgotten to light amidst my brainstorming session in the ashtray.
火鉢の炭を取り替えに参りました。
You set a basket full of charcoal briquettes next to the brazier, then started loading it like a pro.
二見さんには見合いの話などは来ていないのですか?
That stopped her dead.
先日おかみさんにははぐらかされてしまいましたが。
話というほどのものではありませんが。
You set down her tongs and turned to face me.
お見合いの話だとは思うのですが、相手も知らされていないので。
相手を知らされていないのに見合いの話が来るというのも妙ですね。
Because that's what even Hideyomi says, that they don't tell the brides who it is. There can only be one explanation. The Hinagamis were behind this. Only they would be so secretive about their marriage proposals. But if this was true, then that meant Yu Hutami was qualified. Are they just targeting every single woman in Masaki's age group?
これはあくまで予想ですが。
なぜそう思われましたか?
巡りの時とよく似ているからです。
確かに。
I lowered my voice a few decibels so no one outside could hear us.
なぜあなたが選ばれたか?
You cocked her head.
昔から一緒に遊んでいたからでしょうか。
No, that couldn't be it. Otherwise, Mayukami Zono and Misuki Itose wouldn't have been selected. Still, no matter how hard I racked my brain, I couldn't come up with any criteria that applied only to the candidates.
相手が綾人君だと知った今。
正直言ってわかりません。
You abruptly hung and shook her head.
ですが、ひながみ家にはこの旅館も大変お世話になっていますし。
Rejecting such an offer from what was essentially the settlement's equivalent of a noble family would probably be extremely difficult. Given these circumstances,
断ることで角が立つようでしたら、今起こっている事件が解決するまでは凍結するという形ではどうでしょうか?
not that any of this was for me to decide, of course.
私も殺されてしまうとお考えですか?
She looked dead into my eyes through her spectacles, afraid but determined. Thus I had no choice but to be brutally honest.
自分の想像でしかありませんが、あなたが被害者となる可能性は十分にあります。
そうですね。犯人の目星などはついているのですか?
ついていればこんなところでのんびりしていませんよ。
いえ、構いませんよ。
You smiled.
ともあれ、犯人は捕まっておらず、どこの誰ともわかりません。
そうですね。
失礼ですが、二見さんのお部屋はどちらですか?
母屋の2階。 だいたい受付の上あたりです。
そうなると
祖母も隣の部屋におりますし。
くれぐれもお気をつけてください。
The settlement was full of wooden buildings, so any ruckus would be audible from nearby rooms. Therefore, Yuka Kirimura had most likely been lured outside by someone. Uh-huh.
では、私はこれで失礼いたします。
It's almost like one of the members of the family who she's kind of been sworn to serve said, meet me at this spot, and then Nanako or Karen was waiting there to just boom. You grabbed the basket and got to her feet.
今晩も冷えるでしょうから、暖かくしてお休みなさいませ。
She bowed and left the room. Much I'd love to hit the sack, I've still got some work to do. Picked up the brazier and hauled it over to the door. Then left the underquilt of the futon behind, wrapped myself up in the covers, and leaned against the wall by the door. I'd be able to hear if anything happened in the hallway. If I was quiet enough, I could probably sense anyone at the inn's front door, too. The odds of an attack on Yu Hutami today were extremely low. Not merely because Yuka Kirimura was only just killed, but because the murderer shouldn't have any idea that Yu was a bridal candidate when even she herself wasn't sure. Still, that was no excuse to let my guard down. After all, there was still a suspect on the loose. All of a sudden, the floorboards in the hallway creaked, with Nanako Sawashiro, garbed in yukata, appearing just a few seconds later. I watched as she entered a nearby room. She was one of my suspects. Not only was she in a position to learn of the bridal candidates, but all the murders happened in her relative vicinity too. I lit a cigarette using the fire of the brazier. She said she'll be returning to Tokyo tomorrow. Should I tag along to keep an eye on her? Maybe we could even ask her some questions on the way. Questions that could establish an incentive to kill, of course. Just as Nanako herself had said not too long ago, she had no clear motive. Not for killing the bridal candidates, nor Yuki Kirimura. However, even if she was just a messenger, no, because she was a messenger, she'd learned the identities of the candidates. In that case, though, she should have had no reason to kill Yuki Kirimura. But wait, what if Yuka's murder was a mistake? I took out my notebook. There I wrote names Yuka Kirimura and Yu Hutami on a blank page. Maybe the killer got the two of them mixed up. Are they spelled with similar characters? One sec, let me go to the VNDB page real quick, because usually they have like the actual characters laid out under the character names. I'm actually curious now. Yuka Kirimura and Yu Hutami. Let's see, where are y'all at? There's Yu Hutami. And where are you at, Yuka Kirimura? No. No, I don't see how you could get those characters mixed up. Like, their names both start with the U, right? But as far as like the actual characters used to spell their names, there's no way you're getting those mixed up. There is no shot. I don't think the killer got the two of them mixed up. Unless all she heard was the you, right? Like, Karen or Nanako is eavesdropping, and all they hear is you. So they think, oh, Yuka? Yuka? Because, as far as I'm concerned, there's no way you could get the two mixed up. Dawn had arrived. Ultimately, I ended up dragging the whole futon over to the door and spent the whole night watching the hallway. I mean, hey, it works. I would have frozen to death had I simply stuck with the covers, after all.
おはようございます。なぜこんな隅で寝ておられるのですか?
You looked down on me in bewilderment, though given her temperament and profession, I was sure she wasn't mocking me.
昨晩は何もありませんでしたが。
I got out of the futon.
おかげさまで。朝食はいかがなされますか?
いただきますよ。
Came across Nanako Sawashiro at the entrance after breakfast.
どちらに行かれるんですか?
今日東京に戻ることにしたので、黒谷先生のところへ挨拶に行こうと思いまして。
やはり今日帰られるのですか?
Face grew downcast yet again.
病院の関係でお正月も手伝わなければならないことが多いんです。
If you ask me, that sounds like an excuse. Yeah, I was gonna say, you got real defensive all of a sudden for no reason. Not that I planned to challenge her on it, mind.
自分も今日帰るつもりなんですよ。よろしければご一緒いたしませんか。
それは助かります。やっぱり一人だと心細いですから。
Nanako smiled.
元々のバスはありますかね。
Well, that settled, my biggest concern shifted to finding transportation down at Toyama Station.
というわけでして、今日の昼頃にはこちらを立とうと思っています。
Went to the police station informed Inui of my plans.
そうか。
沢城奈々子さんが東京に帰るとのことでしたので。
何か分かったことがあるのならば。
まだ何も判明しちゃいませんよ。
君もか。
潔白であるという証明ができていないというだけですよ。
疑うに足る証拠はいくつか上がっているのだがね。
It must have been when she'd seen Lord Hina.
発見は早朝だった。沢城の家と川瀬の家は離れており、その時間に前を通ることが不自然だった。
彼女は何と？
父親の手伝いで遅くなったと言っていた。確かに川瀬家のさらに奥に父親の作業場があったようだ。
父親に確認は取らなかったのですか？
取った。確かに仕事の手伝いをさせていたと認めたが、朝までやらねばならないような仕事をしているとは思えん。
彼女の父親は鉱山技師だと聞いていますが、当時は体調を崩しがちでろくに仕事をしていなかったとか。
沢城奈々子ではなく、父親本人に話を聞きたいところだが、彼はすでに東京だ。
こちらでも調べてみますよ。まあ、彼女を通した情報しかつかめないかもしれませんが。
After all, I barely even knew a thing about her father.
構わんよ。
Inui handed me a large envelope from a nearby filing cabinet.
こちらで起こった事件の記録だ。
よろしいのですか？
どうせ時効を迎えているからな。
Took the files and an old black and white photo out of the envelope. The latter depicted the now familiar clay doll.
川瀬幸子と財前恵子の遺体に収められていた土人形だ。
I'd already surmised as much from the age of the photograph to the point I hadn't even needed to check the name written on its back.
別の写真も混じってますね。
仕草さつきと呼ばれていた身元不明者の遺体だ。死死欠損と土人形がなかった以外は、今回の桐村由香と同じ状況だ。
Was it really, though? According to Masaki, Saya Shigasa had been the one who dismembered Satsuki. Inui probably didn't know that. I felt he ought to, but that would require explaining how I'd come across said information. Still, I owed Inui for this info, so I had to repay him. But Masaki would ultimately be the one paying the price in my place.
乾さん、この集落の左ヒンナと呼ばれる地区の奥に、
何の話かね。
その周囲の地面を掘ってみたら、
何が出てくるというの。
さあ、自分も人づてに聞いたものですから。
雛神綾人から直接。
So right through me, huh?
まあいい。手の空いているものにやらせるとしよう。
Officer Takayama, huh? His face came to mind immediately, which probably didn't say much about my opinion of him.